This is episode 27 of This Makes Me Happy. I want to invite you to check out Everything is Awesome, a podcast by Kevin Gallagher, aka Nerdy Kev. Kev was on my episode from the Philadelphia Podcast Festival last week, and he invited me to be on his podcast, which will be out this Wednesday. Please go to awesomepodcast.com or search for Everything is Awesome on iTunes to find the episode. I will also include links to it from my show notes. Welcome to This Makes Me Happy, a podcast about people and what makes them happy. My name is Bernardo Margulis. I'm a designer, art director, and educator, and I'm the principal of This Makes Me Happy, a studio where I help my clients with branding and visual communications. I'm interested in hearing what makes people happy, so I'm asking them to share through This Makes Me Happy, the podcast. Every week, I will bring a conversation with a new guest on any topic they choose, and we'll learn what makes that person happy. Hello, today I'm very happy to have Phil Ferguson with me. Phil is an artist living in Australia. He creates hand-crocheted hats that he posts on social media under Chiller Philly and has been featured by Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, Frankie Magazine, BBC, and even on Instagram's account. Phil, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Else from the introduction I did, is there anything you want the audience to know?
I don't know. I should really have something prepared. I don't know. I usually do, I guess, hey, maybe this is a thing. I just do things on the fly and I take it as it comes. So like, I'm not, I guess, yeah, I'm very free spirited, it would seem.
That works for me.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted the audience to know is this is officially the most time difference I've in the past 24 episodes. 14 hours ahead. So you're speaking from the future.
Yeah, I am. Imagine if it was like the next day already or something like that.
Yeah.
Then when we're well into the future, we're working on different days.
Well, originally the time we were going to talk 7:30 in the morning your time would have been the day before for me. So we almost talked from the day before and after.
It's always so weird. I always forget about time differences sometimes. It's only when you have to like Skype or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's when you realize what everybody's time is all at different rates.
For me, the best was when I went to Beijing. It was exactly 12-hour difference. So I knew, if I called my family, it was like, all right, it's 10 in the morning here. It's going to be 10 in the evening.
It's easy to remember.
Yeah. But now we're 14 hours ahead, and it's 8:30 for you and 6:30 for me. So.
Oh, that's even weirder to think about because that's like very early in the morning and this is like after dinner. That's so.
So you're digesting your last meal, and I'm like, I still haven't had coffee yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. See, that's what makes it sound so bizarre. Oh,
but isn't it awesome that we can just be having this conversation? You're in Australia and in Philadelphia and in the US, and
yeah. No, that's actually well. I guess the funny thing is, like I've always been around it. Given that I'm quite young. So like, for me, I guess I've always been like, yeah, you could always have done that sort of stuff, you know?
I don't think
yeah.
I'm that much older than you, but I do remember a time when we couldn't do that. So
I feel like I've always been around. I feel like even if everybody's in their 20s, there's kind of like a few years difference where everything just kind of like happened at the same time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Internet, for making this happen.
I don't even have podcasts if there wasn't the internet.
Yes. Or Apple, because I think they made up the podcast format.
Like, oh, exactly. So look at that. Thank everybody.
Thank you. Phil, this conversation is making me very happy, but I also want to learn what makes you happy.
Oh gosh, there's so many things, I guess. Well, actually, maybe this is kind of so over the past weekend I kind of went away. So I live in Melbourne and I went to Sydney for the weekend. And I guess kind of being away from kind of all the places, all the kind of work I had to do and all that sort of stuff. That was actually the really, really fun time. And funnily enough, like it was kind of a rare time where I kind of went to Sydney and I changed my flights to leave a few days later and I kind of just had to wing my little trip. So I just kind of put out there to everybody who was in Sydney that I was around and everybody just kind of said, hey, do you want to do whatever? And yeah, it was actually kind of fun to kind of have people just be wanting to see you because you're visiting and all that sort of stuff. So that was pretty fun.
How far is Sydney from Melbourne?
It's an hour's flight away, but they're two completely different places. especially in the context of Australia. Like, we're all on the coast and all that sort of stuff, like all the major cities, but the culture in Melbourne and the culture in Sydney are two completely different things. And so kind of being in a different place, because the weather was the same, but Sydney's warmer and Melbourne's colder. And yeah, they're two very different places. So it was nice to be away from Melbourne for a while.
So is it being in Sydney or is it being away from Melbourne?
I think it was just being away and kind of having a little mini trip, because I've been to Sydney so many times within the last year or so, doing different work things and that sort of thing. And I think I like the idea of kind of going on trips and being away, or even just going to like festivals or those sorts of things where you kind of, especially more specifically when you go to somewhere with a specific purpose. So yeah, if you want to go on a trip to a festival, you kind of have to force yourself to kind of mingle and make new friends and all that sort of stuff. Like, my whole thing is, well, actually these days all I do is work, and then I kind of go out and have fun and party and all that sort of stuff. And I guess like a lot of the incentive to do all that sort of stuff is to meet new people and all that sort of stuff. So I'm very much kind of a person who kind of thrives off that social interaction, I guess.
So is that what made this trip different? You had more social interactions than before?
Yeah. Because like the last time I went, I stayed for around a week, or at least 5 days. Last time I went to Sydney. But I was going there for Mardi Gras, and I went there straight. Got off the plane, went straight to the parade, and then from the parade went straight to the big after party. And so I kind of my peak moment. And so the rest of the week was kind of like, why am I here? And I had a few other things to do, but it just didn't have the same sort of vibe, because I kind of did everything in the first day and I didn't have anything planned. But in this case, I kind of didn't have any plans at all, and I came on a Friday night where I kind of just decided to see a friend and stay in my hotel room for a day, and then the other days I went out and saw people for lunch and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was kind of one of those sorts of things. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that last time there was a big expectation and it all happened at once, but this time you had no expectations, and that allowed it to be better or more fun?
Yeah, exactly. And also kind of like one of the things that I kind of let go of when I was over there was kind of the way I used apps. So and I mean like dating apps and that sort of stuff. When I guess when I went over to Sydney this time, I just decided like, hey, I'm just going to utilize apps to just kind of meet people. Obviously, there's no expectations because I'm only there for a short period of time. And that was kind of a lot more fun as well, kind of just talking to a whole bunch of people. I guess because when you're in your own city or whatever, it's a definitely different experience, because you kind of may or may not see that person again. And, it's a long developing relationship or whatever you have going on there. But it was just kind of fun to kind of just talk to random people while I was there. It was just kind of different. Usually I don't really have too much fun in Sydney. Well, I do have fun in Sydney, but it as a place, after I leave, I just kind of miss home. But kind of at the end of this trip, I just kind of liked it. I don't know. Maybe I was going through some sort of crisis where I was hating where I lived or something. But like, yeah, I like traveling and that sort of stuff. And meeting people is kind of like what I do in life. That's like my main thing.
Where else have you traveled?
Well, I've traveled all around Australia. I'm originally from Perth, so I lived on the complete other side of the country. So moving and all that sort of stuff and traveling over this side was kind of a big deal back a few years ago. But at this point now I live in Melbourne, so everything's so close. That's why I've all of a sudden just been going to Sydney for like multiple times a year, just because it's convenient, and that's where I've just been doing work stuff. But I did travel overseas, but that was like 2000 and 2001. And obviously that's like 15 years ago. So that was a very long time ago. Like I eventually wanted to go traveling. I really wanted to go traveling this year, like around this time, just because it's summer. I'm in the Northern Hemisphere, but I kind of ruined that plan because I decided to do my art stuff full time. And so it's taken me a while to get into the habit of saving and kind of doing all that sort of stuff when you're kind of relying on doing things yourself.
So just for perspective, for those of us who are not familiar with Australia, how far is Perth from Melbourne, and how far from Sydney?
Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Hobart. They're all pretty much all the East Coast major cities, or in Canberra, the capital. And Perth is literally on the other side. So that's probably like a 3-4 hour plane ride across. And then obviously everything else is almost like 1 hour or so apart from each other. Then Brisbane might be a bit further away, but just depends on where you're coming from. They're on complete other sides of the country. It's kind of like going from LA to New York. Like, it's that sort of distance.
And how long ago did you move?
I moved 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now. And I've done my Instagram for pretty much that, like 2 years. So I've pretty much been doing what I've been doing now since I moved. So it's kind of crazy how that's kind of worked out.
Did the move influence how much you're traveling? Did it influence what you're doing, the Instagram?
Yeah. I doubt I would be moving and going to different places and even considering going overseas. Because when I think about when I want to go traveling and going overseas and that sort of stuff, it's just to meet all the people that I've met through my Instagram. So I feel like everything's been informed. Everything that I'm currently my current aspirations, my current relationships, everything has just been informed by me moving to Melbourne. Obviously, that's going to make sense considering that that's kind of a major life event, I guess. But yeah, I wouldn't be doing anything the same if I didn't move. And I guess at this point now, I've kind of found a purpose in kind of traveling, because I guess a lot of young people, they just love traveling for the sake of experiencing cultures and going to a new place. But I guess with me, when it comes to things like traveling, I want to actually go to that destination with a specific purpose, whether it is to meet a whole bunch of people or for networking or something like that, because I think I just want to kind of make the most of. I want to almost kill two birds with one stone, and you kind of can't really experience a culture unless you're also engaging with the people, I guess.
Have you always had that perspective on travel?
Not really. I think because I never really thought about traveling overseas for the longest time, only until now. And I think it's just because, like I was saying, at this point, I actually have some sort of purpose in going overseas. Before, it was just kind of like something I could do if I saved up enough money. And I guess like it's a thing when you're kind of around that university college age where you just go on one of those big world trips to like Europe, or you do the whole like Southeast Asia, Australia trip, or, you know, all those sorts of things. And after seeing so many people do those sorts of things, it really just made it seem like some sort of weird rite of passage that people had to go through, but it wasn't necessarily things that they wanted to do. And so I think I just had in my mind that I really just wanted to go to places that I really knew that I wanted to go to, because it's one thing for me to decide to go on some big Kentucky Europe trip, but it's another thing for me to actually go there to actually enjoy it.
Is it a psychological thing? Is it an emotional thing? When you travel, do you transform yourself in some manner?
Well, I guess when I moved to Melbourne, I'd been here a few times before, and kind of the point of which we settled down, I realized I had to, like, I'm a person who approaches everything kind of, if I have a problem, I'll try and like hustle to kind of resolve that problem, but I won't necessarily resolve it in a conventional way. So when it came to kind of moving to Melbourne, and I was like, well, how am I going to make friends who have similar interests, instead of kind of working a job that had those sorts of people, or kind of sussing out, for example, and I'm talking within the arts in the context of me, but instead of kind of, I'm going to go to exhibition openings or I'm going to do this, I was just like, well, I feel like the best thing is to kind of put yourself out there. And so if people are attracted to you, then they'll just come to you, and you already know at that point you have some sort of common interest, instead of kind of playing the game of, hey, I'm Phil, and then you may or may not know that person because you actually know nothing about them outside of you're in the same situation, but as people you may not know. And because the stuff that I do as art is very niche, I kind of knew that if somebody was digging it, then they'd probably like me as well, and I'd probably like them. So yeah, it's all a learning experience, and that's why I kind of always want to just go there with a purpose, because I'm not trying to find myself or anything like that, but I do kind of like the idea of having some sort of expectation when I get there, and then kind of over time kind of fulfilling it and all that sort of stuff. Like it's just all emotional. Like that's the whole purpose of my Instagram. That's why I don't sell them, and that's why I don't do anything like that, because I'm emotionally attached to it in that way.
So you keep all of them, even the ones you had some commissioned, right?
Yeah, so the commissioned ones, so I guess the difference between things that I do for myself and things that are commissioned is that obviously things that I do for myself, I do in my own spare time, and kind of the output is for myself. So I can work on it for whatever period of time and for whatever output I want. And those usually give me really good, like, emotional kind of satisfaction, I guess. And that's why I wouldn't just sell them to any old random, because people place different kinds of value on things. So I'm sure if I just gave my hat to just any old random, they wear it on their head, they throw it around, they do, and that's like hours worth of my work, and they're just kind of treating it like it's nothing. But when it comes to commissions, I guess at that point, they're willing to pay me and they already have their own idea. It's not my idea, that they're just utilizing my skills. That's when I can really just detach myself from doing commissioned work and kind of doing my own work, in that there's no point in me getting attached to something that isn't my own idea. And obviously I would make it to the way I make it. But at the end of the day, like, for example, if somebody asked me to make, I don't know, like a specific type of flower or something, like I probably would never have thought of doing that. So I'm willing to just make it just for that other person or company or business or whatever.
And you said this was a way of meeting new people, and this seems to be a recurring thing with your travel and your art.
Yeah.
How has it worked in terms of meeting new people?
Well, my Instagram is, I think whenever, like, it's kind of funny because whenever everybody asks me that question, I guess, like, imagine the embarrassing response if I said I made no friends, like.
And you've been at it for 2 years and you keep going.
Yeah. It's like, 2 years after I set out, I still just haven't met anybody. But no, the thing is, the lucky thing with me and my Instagram and kind of what I set out for it to do and all that sort of stuff is that the point of which it got really successful and popular media-wise and all that sort of stuff, and since I began, so I started in August, and the first time I got contacted for press was October. So the turnaround was really quick for any sort of attention, and kind of as soon as I got any sort of attention and gained a large enough following, I was doing like appearances, and I got to meet people who were like journalists who were interviewing me, and kind of one of literally the first publication that published me was Frankie magazine here in Melbourne. And the guys who work there, they just like casually just asked me on Instagram. They're like, hey, we should all be friends because we all haven't really met you. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And they were the first friends I made from it. And so just kind of through that sort of, like, it just felt it was like inevitable that I would make friends. I'm usually an outgoing person anyway. So kind of at the point of which people were noticing what I did, it just really was kind of like instant that I made friends. And especially the types of friends I wanted. They were like everybody, I'm like good friends with so many people now, and they've really helped me kind of develop as a person. And I think that's kind of why I do appreciate kind of meeting new people, and kind of when I go traveling to places, I always want to meet new people. Like, I'm not there to party and I'm not there to do all the touristy things. I actually just want to meet people and hang out with them and learn experiences, stuff like that, because that's really where I become a better person, I guess. And I'm such a different person from when I first moved here. And that's just because I've managed to experience so much more, and people have taught me so much. And yeah, I'm a completely different person, but like in a good way. Like, I've really, really become myself. I didn't discover myself, but I've become more comfortable with myself, I guess.
Do you mind if I ask how old are you?
23.
23. So you're in that period of time, young adult, when you're freer to do certain things and explore and make new friends. And
because obviously when I moved I was 21, and so I guess that's kind of coming out of the age where you are kind of encouraged to become an adult, and then being here from that age onwards, and especially within the last 8 months where I've just only been doing this sort of stuff, I've had the freedom to do whatever I want, and that's kind of been the best part about it. And that's why kind of I'm always willing to go traveling and stuff like that, because I can. Like, I have the time free to just go somewhere. I don't really need to kind of think about, oh, I have to ask for a shift off work, or I don't need to be free because I asked somebody. I can just be free because I am. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about, but it's definitely helped kind of let me work my own business out, I guess.
And is that how it was? I'm guessing before you were in full time, you had a job and you had to work around all the stuff.
Yeah, well, I worked a casual job, so the hours were not necessarily as regular. While we did have kind of designated weekends and weekdays, the hours were always different because I used to work in hospitality. So kind of a thing I realized is by doing a hospitality job, but then doing an arts job, they just don't align as careers.
Mm.
And so that's why I had to kind of take the jump to just doing my stuff full time, just because it was just getting really hard to kind of coordinate between the two when one has obviously a higher priority than the other, but by prioritizing one, it made the other one more kind of stressful. And so, yeah, so that was kind of doing my own thing and all this sort of stuff has definitely made me happier. Like I've never been as happy as I have been over the last 8 months or whatever, since October last year. And that's just mainly because I pretty much just made the decision to not be working two jobs anymore, especially two completely different jobs.
So what does that mean to you, having this freedom, being able to just sit down all day and do whatever you need to do? How does that feel for you?
Actually, it feels really good, actually. Kind of, I guess this is something that I could use as an example of how my perspective has changed just because I've been doing my own thing. But, back when I first moved, I was so obsessed with like boys and dating and all that sort of stuff. And because I was working another job, it was kind of all you could think about. Just because you went to work, you came home the next day, you went to work, you came home, and you did that for whatever 5 days, for example. And then you had your weekends, which you would fill up with family or just hanging around your house or whatever. Like if you worked an office job and you were crunching numbers and all that sort of stuff and typing out essays, you'd want to think about something else to kind of have an escape. But when you're kind of actively living your life, doing what you like doing, and it's kind of a very passive role, your mind can go to 50 different things and you can just go do it and it gets it out of your system instead of you're sitting in a role and you're just kind of waiting. You can't wait for the day to be over and you can't wait for this and you can't wait for that. Like I have those moments where I'm looking forward to something, but my days go really fast and my weeks go really, really fast. So, and that's just because each day is its own little thing instead of kind of being structured, I guess.
So are you able to force yourself to produce and still enjoy everything?
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. Like when I have so much, like I was saying, my days and weeks just blur into like one long thing. And so I guess that's kind of allowed me to take breaks and all that sort of stuff and not try and jam things within short periods of time. Like I remember when I got my first few commissions and I was working my other job, and it was actually really stressful because I couldn't really do things within short periods of time. Like you'd be tired, and then when it was your weekend, you didn't really want to be doing that extra stuff. But now these days I can just do bits and pieces here and there, and I can just have a day off, but like on any old day. Like I don't necessarily need to be designating myself, this is Sunday, this is your day off, because nothing ever really falls on a regular day.
Has this also affected not just how you meet people, but how you relate to them?
Yeah. So a lot of my friends who live in Melbourne, they're within their like late 20s, early 30s. And obviously we established I'm in my early 20s and my sisters are both in their 30s as well. And so kind of living my own career, doing that sort of thing that I like doing, it really does help me relate to people who are a lot older, but they are working their own jobs, you know? Just because I guess a lot of people around my age, they're either just coming out of studying or they are still currently studying. And it's like a hard thing because when you're so young, you kind of don't really know what you actually want to be doing in life. When you're in high school, they're like, these are the things you should study. Now pick them. Some people just decided to pick from, like from high school what they're going to do at university, and they're still doing it and they may or may not be happy, but it just seems to be the thing that they got stuck in. And so that's what makes me not quite relate to people around my age sometimes, because they're still studying, or they still don't know what they want to do. And then when it comes to older people, obviously they've had many years experience and they might have sorted out their things. I don't want to come across like a young person who thinks they're super mature, but I think just when it comes to the sake of how I can relate to people who are older, I guess a lot of young people still don't quite understand how I can just be a full-time artist, I guess.
So do you feel you've discovered what you want to do? You feel that this is it for you for the rest of your life?
Yeah, well, I guess not necessarily this specific, I make hats for commission work, and I've developed an audience and I've developed some sort of profile, or whatever I've managed to achieve within a short period of time, like within 2 years. Obviously, it's something that I can take and run with it. It's not like I'm deciding that I've done all this work. Oh, now I'm going to study to be a doctor or anything like that. Like, obviously I've done so much in this current role and there's so many opportunities that can come from it. But I do know that this is what I want to do. I've never thought of not being an artist or anything like that throughout life. So it's kind of like a crazy thing to think about doing anything else.
I guess when you moved to Melbourne, it was almost like a fresh start, but did this affect the way you relate to people you already knew from before?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because whenever I think of the people who I was friends with before, there are so many that I met when I was at uni, people who I used to work with and all that sort of stuff, and our relationships are no different. But I think at this point, because by moving to Melbourne and having this fresh start and then kind of coming into my own, it kind of makes me realize some of the people who I was friends with don't necessarily know what I'm actually like. And so that just kind of makes that sort of stuff a bit touchy when they expect me to act a certain way when I know I would never act that way. And that's only just because I know what I'm like, but they don't necessarily know what I'm actually like based on what I am today.
Well, I don't know if this might be this case for you, because I grew up in South America, moved up to the States and moved to New York and moved back. It's how sometimes you meet people at one stage and then you move on and you probably wouldn't be friends with them now, but you're happy that you became friends with them when you did.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing. Like I was saying, like there are so many people who lived in Perth and I'm still good friends with them now and I get along with them. And when they come to visit, like we get along totally good. Like they're people who I can talk about whatever with and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, just by chance I'd met good people at that point in life. And same here. Like because I was thinking about it, like I have so many random people on Facebook from when I moved here, and I slowly delete people when I realize I'm never going to see them again. If I think about, well, I might move in 2 years or something, I might not necessarily see a lot of those people again, but I'll definitely know who the people I would want to keep in touch with, because they're the people who would want to keep in touch with me themselves. It sounds really cliche, but like who your real friends are. But you can't retain every single relationship because you only get so much out of each relationship. And if they're not giving you anything, then there's no point on continuing it. Especially if they're like a leech, if it feels like you have to put in effort, it's definitely a different situation in that sense. But yeah, you always meet a few people here and there throughout different stages of your life. And I still have people that I'm friends with from Perth, but I'm definitely making a lot more friends here as well.
Well, you mentioned social media and it's and deleting people off of Facebook, and it's interesting how now social media allows us to keep in touch with those we want to keep in touch, but then it also allows those, as you're saying, those who leech on to stay in touch with us even if we don't want to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because especially whenever I have any sort of press and stuff, some people kind of post about it, and sometimes I don't mind it when people are like, oh, I know this person. But sometimes it's very transparent why people do it. And it's just kind of one of those weird social currencies where it's like, oh, look at this person. They're famous or whatever. I know I'm friends with them, so I'm cool. Like one of those sorts of things. But also,
you're like, what's your name again?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you never paid attention to me before, but now you know me, you know? But then it's kind of also on the flip side, through social media, like I was saying, with the traveling thing and making friends, like social media has allowed it to be so accessible to meet people from other countries without having actually met them yet. And so when I was saying before about the whole traveling thing and meeting new people, it's really people who I've met through social media and I really want to meet them in person now, because something I think a lot of kind of young people realize, or just anybody realizes from kind of dating through social media apps and stuff like that, is that you don't really know the person until you go on your first date. And so you can talk to them for weeks and weeks and weeks via text, but until you meet them in person, you haven't really met them because you have no sense of how they talk, how they move, their humor, anything like that. So that's just kind of an interesting thing with social media. I kind of realized over this last 2 years or so that, yeah, you don't really know people until you know them, but what social media does allow is you to connect with people over longer distances. It's just up to you to whether or not you meet them or not.
So it's something curious you just said about you don't know someone and you're just chatting and you don't know what they are. And earlier you mentioned going on dating apps and meeting new people, but then you also said that if you put it out there, people will be attracted to you and they're not playing games.
Yep.
This idea of social media, do people not play games when they're doing that, or is it a different kind of game? I don't know. I found my experience with dating apps in the past was that people were playing games, and as you're saying, you don't know them until you meet them.
Yeah. That's so for the longest time over the last few months, I was just like, I'm over dating in the sense of I'm just over having to text somebody and kind of figure all that sort of stuff out. Like at this point, I just ideally want to just go out, meet people. And obviously if you were all going out regularly to the same places, then we're within the same social circles. So kind of developing relationships in that way is very easy because you've already met them in person. So you don't have much kind of effort to have to make with them to kind of get to know them. But yeah, that was something I really was just over, is having to kind of play the game of, do I text today? Do I text tomorrow? Do I respond quickly? Do I not? And it's just kind of like one of those things where it's just like, it's so much effort and it could just be all for nothing. You know, like they could just be like, you are not who I'm into, goodbye. And then it's like, well, great. Like we just wasted all this time talking to each other and we could have just established this a long time ago. Or like one of the things, this is something that's been happening to me a lot lately, but obviously through my various social media platforms and profiles and stuff like that, I've met lots of people and they follow me and that sort of stuff, and especially ones that live in Melbourne. Like if they follow me, for example, on my personal Instagram or on my Facebook or anything, I'd want to meet them at some point. And there's some people that like I still have on all these profiles and I haven't met them in person at all. And lately I've just been asking all these people, like, do you want to hang? And they always take it as some sort of weird, like romantic kind of context. And they just make it seem like so much effort to just hang out. So what's the point of even having me on Facebook if you don't want to hang out?
And is this Facebook not even like a dating app?
No, like on Instagram or on Facebook or anything like that. I know, it's really weird because I don't, and this is why I realized the whole meeting in person thing is really important, because they could easily misinterpret what I'm saying just because I'm saying it via text. I just come across like a very datey person or something like, but if you know me in person, I talk about dating and boys and all that sort of stuff with everybody. It's not like I talk to some people about these topics and some people about these things. Like I talk about the same things with everybody. So it's just kind of one of those things. Dating's very weird these days. It's very hard.
It sounds like trying to not date is also just meet up is also getting hard.
Oh yeah, well, like not dating is not dating has actually been really good, because the thing is, I've met so many people that you just get bombarded with all these people, and you're just kind of like, oh, I don't want to be with anyone now because everybody's harassing me. That's the thing. Like, if you put yourself out there, every single night, and somebody comes up, for example, if I went out like 3 nights in a row and two people on like each on a night decided to come up and they both say, hey, like, let's hang out. And then at that point you're like, well, now I have to juggle two people. Like, I don't want to, like, you know?
Does that happen? Like, do people recognize you when you go out and
yeah, people recognize me out, but the thing is, like, I would hope that they're just coming up to me because they think I'm cool. And then half the time they don't know about anything that I do. Maybe I just look hot or something. I don't know. I don't know. But that's the thing. Like, something I realized over the last few months or whatever, that kind of having lots of people on your table isn't very good when it comes to dating, but rather it is good in kind of making you realize your priorities, because you would almost think that if you had all these options, you would actually appreciate it. But when it happened to me, I was like, oh no, this is actually not what I want. I just want attention from one person, not like 5 people. Yeah, it's just really interesting to think about sometimes. I talk about it with my friends all the time. And we always compare notes and all that sort of, not compare notes, but kind of always tell each other about what happens. I feel like it's just a reoccurring thing. You always get really complacent.
So we're going in and out of dating and friends and hanging out. Like, when you say dating, do you mean romantically dating, or do you mean just hanging out and meeting new people?
Oh yeah. So this is something I realized that people like have different interpretations of. It's just kind of like how people sometimes say, I have an ex, and they saw them for like 2 weeks, you know? But yeah, when I say dating, I mean, yeah, like romantic, like potential partner dating. Hanging out is a different thing, because like I established a long time ago in myself that if I'm going to be going out with anybody, and I mean like partners or anything like that with anybody, it's going to be somebody I would have ended up being friends with before anything else. That's just kind of the mentality I have in my mind when it comes to that sort of stuff. So if I'm keen on somebody, I'll always want to hang out with them, whether or not the night ends up. However, at the end of the day, I just want to get to know them first and kind of not try and put any sort of pressure on anything to happen. But when it comes to like dating's so hard because you kind of almost meet with that expectation. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the point of which you're developing whatever from, and that's when you get like, that's when kind of how I was saying before, you can go weeks upon weeks of just texting, and then you hang out in person and they don't like you. It's just kind of one of those unnecessarily awkward things that people do these days, where they kind of think that that's actually developing some sort of relationship, when in reality, like, you could probably be texting like 20 people at the same time in one day. Like, that's not a real person-to-person, heart-to-heart relationship. Actually, what it reminds me of is I've been really into kind of figuring it, kind of how I develop relationships and stuff out. And have you heard of the love languages?
No, what is that?
It's kind of like the 5 different ways that you prefer to develop relationships, I think. Mm-hmm. That's in my terms. Like, that's probably not exactly it, but they're things such as like giving gifts, kind of physically touching, giving like compliments, spending good time with people, and I think the other one was like doing favors or something like that. But anyway, mine was spending good quality time with somebody, which probably gives context to why I get so much out of kind of hanging out with people and making new friends and like all this sort of stuff. Like, I think I'm just a person who gets so much out of kind of meeting people, and I think that's why I've been so happy and all that sort of stuff over the last 8 months, because I've had the time to just be able to hang out with people, develop relationships, make friends, meet new people, you know, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's just kind of an interesting thing to kind of think about, but I realized kind of a few weeks ago that that's what the sort of person I am like.
Interesting. And is that a new thing, or has that always been the case?
That I've always been into meeting people.
No, the idea of quality time as a way to relate.
I don't know how long that love languages thing has been around for, but I feel like I've always been into spending good time with people, because I just know, especially these days, like I know there's so much, like one of the kind of plus sides of me is my personality. as opposed to the way I act or anything. Because it's so funny because sometimes I forget what I'm like as a like I don't even know what I'm like as a person, but when people describe me to me, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that's how I come across. Yeah, so that's probably the way I best build relationships with people, I guess, that I just interacting with them directly and they just vibe well with me. I'm not sure.
Does that say something about the other person, or is that strictly about yourself?
Everybody's different, and obviously certain traits match well with other people if I get along with people well enough. And that's the way I like to develop relationships. It's probably a reflection of us both, but also that could just be me like having wishful thinking and thinking that everybody just loves hanging out with each other. Like it's like, yeah, this person really did want to be spending 4 hours with me. That was like something that happened the other night. Like I had somebody over and I wasn't sure if they were going to stay for a while or if like they left some stuff at my house. And so they picked it up and I was kind of like, oh, well, like, I don't know if they're going to stay here for a little bit because they said they didn't want to have dinner. So I was like, okay, well, they're probably just popping by and leaving. But they ended up staying from like 7 until like 11 and we had good chat and we even went to the shops, bought something to eat and came back, like we did the whole like spent the night hanging out. And I don't know if that was because that's something that they also appreciate and we just vibed well, or if I don't know, like if I was just that person who's like, no, you can never leave,
You trapped them in.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, sorry, you haven't had dinner yet. No, it was actually full on them. Like they originally said they didn't want to have dinner, and then they ended up having dinner. So that was all on them.
But that's going back to the beginning of the conversation, like going without expectations and
exactly.
Happen.
Yeah, I don't kind of like having. Because that's when you just set yourself up to be sad. Like, that's like, like you're like, oh, I'm so excited for something. And then it happens. And then you're like, oh, that was great. Or, yeah. And hey, actually, that even goes back to the very first thing I said when you asked me to say something about myself. Like, I really am a very go with the flow type. Like, I find my spot and I just run with it. Yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like I've come full circle in what I've been saying now that I realize I said that at the beginning. But yeah, no expectations, because that's when you're setting, especially when it comes to meeting people. You don't want to set expectations on what a person is like until you really get to know them. Hey.
It's taken me a lot longer to realize the same thing. When I go into a situation with expectations 50-50, I'll be disappointed. But if I go without expectations, it's like, oh, I can't get disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you expect, because I guess it's the opposite of expecting the worst, because if it's above average, then it'll be great. But if it's below average, but it's still not bad, you're still like, oh, well, wasn't that bad, but still was kind of bad. And I guess like I also realize like every person's different and you can't really kind of expect the same of everybody, which is why I always get thrown off when people respond to me really weirdly, because it's like, I don't know what you're vibing off me and you don't obviously know what I'm vibing off you. So this is very awkward. And
so I want to pretend completely 180. You like to relate to people, you like to travel. What happens when you're just by yourself and you're not traveling, or you like, does that affect you in any way?
When I'm just at home, there was a period of time where I was like, oh, why do I go out so much? Kind of what I realized is because kind of, at least where I am, like Thursday night really is the beginning of the weekend, I guess, when it comes to going out. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday day, I pretty much would have spent all of those 4 days at home doing nothing but working or whatever else. And so by the time, and not really interacting with people. So by the time it comes to the weekend or Thursday night, I'm like, I want to go out. Like, I want to see people. I want to hang out with people. I want to just be around people. So yeah, so when I'm at home, I guess like I'm usually a pretty independent person, and I actually really do like my own company and that sort of stuff most of the time. But I think when it's too prolonged, so too many days of it, then I just get too crazy and I just want to go out.
So you get cabin fever from
Yeah.
yourself.
Oh yeah, totally, totally. It's really bad. Especially, the worst thing I do is drink too much coffee. And so that just gives me really bad anxiety. So I'm like, oh my God, like I'm here all by myself so much and like I'm stressing over nothing and I need to go for a walk and all that sort of stuff. And I want to sleep and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, it's actually really bad. Like I need a separate studio so I'm outside of my own home all the time. But yeah, I get really bad cabin fever.
But isn't I heard that you mentioned coffee. There's a big coffee culture in Australia. Is that true?
Yeah, and I never drank as much coffee as I had since I moved to Melbourne. Because I drank coffee when I was studying, but that was only when I pulled all-nighters.
Hmm.
But when it comes to being in Melbourne, so when I used to work at my old job, my boss used to just make us coffees all the time, and so I kind of got into the habit of having these really strong coffees in order to kind of work. And then I started buying coffee to like when I wake up and all that sort of stuff. And now these days, and then also when I started my Instagram, I used to use that kind of anxious energy in order to produce work. But now at this point, I just like overdo it because it's just by habit because I'm always at home. So if I have a break, I'm like, well, let's have another coffee, and then I'll have this coffee. But it was probably like an hour since I had the other coffee. So I'm just like, like,
Well, that means you'll like crochet
and,
faster. Your hand shakes, and you didn't have to do the.
well, yeah. Oh yeah, but that's when you start like stressing out. You're like, oh no, like I'm moving too fast now. Like I'm not being going to produce anything or anything like that. So yeah, no, that's when it gets a bit awkward. Yeah, no, I have way too much coffee. So yeah, so that's kind of what plays into me always wanting to. I think that's why I really liked being in Sydney over the weekend because I think it must have just been coming off a period where I was just kind of doing nothing really. Well, I say doing nothing, but like even doing nothing for me is doing something. But I just say I'm doing nothing for the sake of not wanting to sound like I'm flat off my feet or anything like that.
We've talked a lot about your work, and before we move on to the next section, can you tell us just a little bit about your hats and how you come up with them and what's the process?
Yeah. So I guess should I just pretend nobody knows what I do?
I hope everyone knows what you do, but let's pretend because there might be one or two
Yeah,
people
okay.
who
Because usually I just go, yeah, I make like crochet hats. And then everybody's like, oh, okay. And then I think they just expect me to be making beanies or whatever, or like doilies or lace or something. But anyway, I taught myself how to crochet a few years ago now. And when I moved to Melbourne, other than working, I really didn't have anything else going for me. So I started making these hats that were originally inspired by Adventure Time. And then I started getting really into drag. And so I was like, well, I'm going to make these like performance pieces. And my idea was to kind of make these crochet kind of hats that look like inanimate objects. And then kind of when I decided to commit to making my Instagram to make friends, I was like, well, I guess the subject matter will be these crochet hats that look like objects and I'll wear them and this will be what my Instagram will be. And so the moment I started committing to it and I kind of started doing the food things and then that ended up becoming my reoccurring theme. And then it became popular. So then I just forever ran with it. So whenever people were like, well, why do you do food as a theme? It was just kind of what was kind of getting the best response.
So it'll happen just organically?
Yeah, everything from day one of moving to Melbourne came organically. I never forever like made crochet hats throughout my whole life or anything like that. It came full organically once I made my Instagram.
What was the first moment that you grab a hook and yarn? Like, what was that like? Did you think about, I'm going to make this, or just sat there?
I think when I first wanted to make stuff, it was like so many years ago now, but I think my sister had this, like, how to make little, like, it's called amigurumi, but it's like just those little, like, figures, crocheted little, like, soft toys. And so I was like, oh, cool, I want to learn how to do this. And so I studied fine art, like to give context, I studied fine art, so kind of picking up any sort of skill set was just kind of a natural thing to do. But obviously, I kind of never developed it as much as since I was in Melbourne because it was just always something I did, but never really did that much. And then when I kind of committed to updating an Instagram, I was like, okay, like this is my process, this is my practice. And so, yeah, so I guess I'm pretty lucky that I do well at a very niche craft. Well, not niche craft, but a perceived to be niche things.
And have you done commissions for Instagram and
Yeah,
Progressive Insurance?
yeah. So I've done like them, Virgin, a few other like food companies here. Yeah, so I've done all those sorts of things, which are always fun, just because it's just not my idea to make whatever they ask me to. So it's just easy to just be like, cool, like I can do that, as long as it's realistic. But yeah.
Great. And then you're meeting other people, all those people, and that's how I found you, and that's how we're having this conversation. Through your Instagram.
Yep.
So I'm happy you started that initiative, because otherwise we wouldn't be here chatting now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Phil, now I have the rapid fire section. I want to ask you a few questions about things that make you happy, and I want your very quick reaction. Ready?
Yeah.
Who makes you happy?
Myself.
What is the first happy moment you can remember?
Oh, my birthday.
Any birthday or your actual birthday?
No, I feel like all my birthdays. Every single one of them.
Finish the sentence. Happiness means?
Laughing.
Do you have a happy food?
Oh, cake.
Oh, any kind of cake, or is there a particular kind of cake?
No, I'm an awful sweet tooth, so any sort of dessert, baked goods.
Are cakes there like? Because when I moved to the States, cakes are like you have a cake, you have filling, and you have a topping. Is that how it is there, or can you just have a plain cake and?
Yeah,
cake?
I think there's a lot of different. I guess being in Melbourne, it's kind of a food capital of Australia, so everybody's a bit elaborate with their cakes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, we have a variety, but that's what you're saying is not an uncommon thing.
I was a little shocked because for me, cake was just the cake itself.
Yeah. No, the cakes are the full experience.
When are you the happiest?
When I'm out.
What is the happiest word you can think of?
Damn it.
Is that it?
Yeah, let's just say that.
Damn it.
Yeah. Hey, it's making me laugh, so it must be a good word, hey.
And where is your happy place?
At home.
And home meaning Australia, or is there another more...
No, I think
Melbourne, or another abstract?
No, I think just as a thing, like, when you're home, you're safe, whether it be, like, I could say Melbourne's my home, but I could also say my room is my home, or when I'm with my parents back home, I'm home. Anything like that, like it's a safe space where you can just kind of be yourself and not have to worry about other people, I guess.
So, to get a little cliche, home is where the heart is.
Yes. That's awful. I sound so cliche of like a bumper sticker.
But I said it, so you're good.
Yeah, cool. Like you did.
Phil, where can we find you? Where can the audience see your work? Or
so you can follow. Well, mainly you can follow me at Chili Philly. That's ChiliPhilly on Instagram. But I do have a Twitter, a Facebook, and a Snapchat, which is all the Chili Philly, just because Chili Philly was taken on every single other thing except for Instagram. So yes, you can follow me on that. Though you'll definitely get different experiences on all four Instagram's my main one where you can check out my hats, and the other ones are very different things. So if you want full 4 dimensions of me, you can follow me on everything.
And I'll make sure to link from the show notes. And everyone has to check out this Instagram. And especially, when did you start doing the videos? A couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, I started doing the videos maybe like a month or two ago. So yeah, that's it. That was very much a response to kind of how social media is going these days, and people love videos. So I'm doing that now.
And the photos were great, and now the videos are even better. So
yeah,
definitely.
Everybody's given me good response for them, so I'm glad I went that direction.
Yeah, so definitely everyone go check it out. And why Chili Philly? How did you? I mean, obviously Philly, but
yeah. So there was this website back in the day called Daily Booth, which was kind of a precursor to Instagram. So it was almost exactly like Instagram, where you can upload photos and it comes up on a feed and all that sort of stuff, but it was browser based. So it was kind of like, it was within the same period of time that Facebook just started becoming popular and MySpace was kind of dying. This was back in high school, and that was when Sweet Chili Philadelphia was becoming really popular. So like, Philadelphia cheese, when you flip it over and that's sweet chili sauce. And so everybody at school was calling me Chili Philly. And so that was my username on Daily Booth. And so that kind of hovered around as my username. Daily Booth since had closed down, and I got a Tumblr, and then I kind of changed the name and stuff as well. But when I decided that I wanted to kind of make my new Instagram, I decided to just leave it as Chili Philly, just because I'd lived with it as my name for so long. And funnily enough, like, people, even though my name is Phil and my username is Chili Philly, people call me Chili instead of calling me Philly. So it's just a strange thing to kind of think about. I'm like, oh, why would you call me by the part that isn't my name? But
I wonder if people think you're from Philadelphia.
Yeah, like there's so many things with it. Like, people are like, oh yeah, like chili, like cold, like you're cold. I'm like, no, wrong chili. There's so many different things. Like, people always spell it differently and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so that's why I'm called Chili Philly.
And I was just so happy because it had Philly spelled like we spell Philly for Philadelphia. So.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, my bosses, when they went to the States a few years ago, they bought me back a shirt that says "I love Philly." Obviously, they bought it from Philly, but I can wear it, and it looks like I'm talking about myself. So yeah, so I need to go there and buy all the merchandise.
Yes, and let me know when you're around, because that's where I am.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Oh, that'll work out. See, I always want to go to places if I know people. Look at that. That works out.
Yeah. And we'll just buy all the Philly merchandise all over town.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm looking forward to it now.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have to talk about it and make it happen.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing everything that makes you happy. This free-flowing conversation of travel and dating and
essentially it was essentially what makes me happy dating.
Dating and traveling.
Dating and traveling. Making friends.
And now you'll get a lot more friends and you'll have to travel and see them.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, that's the incentive.
Love it. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And thank you, Phil, for sharing what makes you happy. I had a great time chatting with you, especially after having followed your work for a while. It's a lot of fun, and I hope everyone enjoys it. Special thanks to Jason Zappolo for editing this episode, and to Orlo Margulis for help with social media, and Rocio Castañeda for your ongoing support. You can go to thehappypodcast.com/episode 27 for show notes and links for this episode. And if you want information about this project, as well as some resources, past episodes, and a contact form, you can go to thehappypodcast.com. Please visit us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at The Happy Podcast. And if you enjoyed the show, please go to iTunes and subscribe to get weekly updates. And very important, please go to iTunes and leave a review, because that's the best way for other people to find us. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week.